Hey, good to see you. Welcome to this video called How to Master Bet Sizing. Sorry, bet sizing. Bet sizing. It's been a while. Nice to see you. Welcome to this video now with added shelf. And you can tell I was in charge of decorations for the shelf. I tried to order some pot plants. What is that? I'm not very good at shopping. I didn't do dimensions. Let's talk about your poker. We're going to talk about bet sizing. Bet sizing. This is a topic suggested by one or two of you in the comments, and we don't have a good guide to it, but that's an oversight because it's a really important part of playing good no-limit hold'em. The clue is in the title with no limit. There is no limit to your bets except for the chips that you have in front of you. There's a minimum, but there's no maximum. That gives you a huge amount of flexibility. And if you think about it, that is one of your weapons when you play no limit hold'em. Now, there are some things fighting against you using it as an effective weapon. The first and biggest thing is convention. So there's convention in the bigger picture sense. Everyone tends to bet the same. So years ago, for an opening raise, people used to raise 3x the big blind all of the time. And then it became 2x the big blind. And now late in tournaments, it's, 2 point something. But you have these big conventions that happen in poker generally, and then at the table you're at, especially in live games, certain bet sizes become the norm at certain limits. I'm sure you've noticed this. So that kind of creates an atmosphere where you don't have flexibility in your bets. It's particularly true when you play online and you have the bet slider and you can preset the amounts that you bet slide to. You're going to be pushed into making the same bets often. Now let's address what our actual idea should be here. What should our idea be? Well, our idea as ever is to maximize our expected value. We want to make bets, we want to make investments to try and win the money in the middle that are going to have the biggest return. So if we're bluffing, we want to get folds for the smallest possible price, right? We want to risk the minimum to win what's in the middle. If we're trying to get value, we want to bet as much as possible in terms of our bet size and a bet that will be called. What this pushes you towards in a theoretical sense is an exploitable pattern of betting, So goal number one in this bet sizing guide is to embrace exploitative betting, embrace exploitative and exploitable betting. So what does that word mean in a poker context? You may well have heard it and be familiar with it, but just in case you're not, it means that you're betting in variable amounts to try and exploit the tendencies of your opponent. So if your opponent calls way too much, right, if their main fault is to call way too much, well, you want to bet more because they're going to call anyway, right? They're not going to notice if you've bet 200 or 300, but if you only bet 200 and they were going to call anyway, you've cost yourself 100 chips. Now, the downside of this idea is that good opponents can exploit you. If you're betting with that tendency, well, they can start to get tells on your bets via your bet sizing. And really top players will use a game theoretic style of betting and bet sizing. They'll try and bet in a way that can't be exploited in the manner I've just suggested. I would put to you that right now in most game situations is not a problem. It is not your concern. You may give up a little bit by having bets that are easier to read, but only by good players and only after they've played with you for a while. Right now, your biggest mission is to exploit players that make mistakes, like the one I mentioned, like calling too much. So exploitable betting is going to make you more money in most of the games you play and certainly most of the tournaments you play until you get in games where you're mixing with a lot of pros, in which case you probably don't need this video anyway. So how do we do that? Key number two is this fantastic trigger question. Every time you make a bet, and I would set yourself a challenge to do this for the next few times you play, ask, what am I trying to achieve with this bet? Question mark. What am I trying to achieve with this bet? And use it even for pre-flop raises. So just to get into the habit, when you get used to it, you'll only do it for significant bets. But what I want to do is intercept your thought pattern and really deliberately ask, what is the actual purpose of this bet? Not just, I've got ace king and I bet. The reason to do that is that's step one of finding the right bet size, because we can't know the best amount to bet unless we've decided what the mission of the bet is. So are you trying to get calls? Are you trying to get folds? Once you've got a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve, then you've got a better plan to go forward. So if you know, for example, that you've got 1,000 chips left and you've got the nuts on the turn, and there's, you know, let's say 400 chips in the pot, you're going to be asking yourself, how do I have my best chance of getting this 1,000 chips called by my opponent or my opponents? And then you're going to plan your bet size on the turn and then the river accordingly, right? So ask, what am I trying to achieve with this bet? The next step is to ask, how can my bet sizing best achieve that mission? So how can I size my bet so that it best achieves the mission, the objective I had for the bet? So let's look at two very clear different use cases, if you like. Use case, haven't said that in a video before. First of all, value betting. So let's say you want to make a bet that on balance, you're pretty sure you want to get called. So you think you have the strongest hand, right? You're trying to get value. Ask yourself, what is the range of my opponent's hands here? And if you're not super comfortable with that process and you're new to it, ask what's the strength of their likely range of hands? Are they super weak? Have they checked 3 times and don't look interested and it's a scary board? Or, you know, have they shown a bit of strength earlier in the hand? Do they have quite a strong range? And do they have something they quite like to call? Whatever. Start, if you're new to hand ranges, start by thinking, how strong is this person's hand? Another question you can ask is, what part of this range am I trying to get called by? So a lot of the times he has nothing, so he's not calling a bet. But when he does have something, it's very often top pair or better. So I'm going to make a bigger bet size. Now, there are opponents where, you know, if they've got anything, they're calling, in which case you can really push this and lean towards getting a ton of value. Early in tournaments, when players have tons of chips in front of them, you might be able to bet, you know, double, 3 times the pot. What I'm going to tell you later on, spoiler alert, is to test different bet sizes. And with value bets, I'd really encourage you to push the amount that you value bet and really test bigger bets. Because every time you get one called, that is money that goes straight on your bottom line as a poker player. And the difference, one of the big differences between winning players and break-even or losing players is they value bet more and they value bet more efficiently and oftentimes with bigger bet sizing, especially against players that call too much. Second use case, if you like, is bluffs. So with bluffs, your answer to the first question is you're trying to achieve a fold. And your second question should be, how much do I have to bet to give myself a good chance of getting a fold? Again, think about your opponent's range. Are they likely to have a strong or weak range based on the pre-flop action, their action post-flop, and the run-out? Based on your hand and what you've represented, how much strength have they needed to get to this point if you're, for example, bluffing on the river? And then size your bet based on the idea of what hands. The more you can think about what specific hands you're trying to get a fold from, what part of their range, how much of their range, what specific hands, then you can think how much you're going to, you're going to have to bet. So you might find, for example, on heavily polarized boards, you can bluff less because they either have it or they don't. They either want to call or they don't, especially with weaker opponents. If you've got an opponent that's stubborn or if you've got a situation where it's hard for you to have strength, you might need to bet more. Now, when you are sizing your bluffs, remember that this doesn't describe all your opponents, but a lot of people don't come all the way to the river just to fold, right? I see this a lot. People make bet sizes which are like half the pot or 2/3 of the pot. They're trying to be clever and make it look like they're trying to get paid off. And then they get disappointed where their opponent that's called all the way along and is a stubborn opponent just quickly calls their 2/3 of the pot size bet. You might really need to bombs away if you want to get folds in those situations. And maybe, you know, it's not a situation where bluffing is optimal. But if you ask these questions, what am I trying to achieve? And then with my bluffs, what hands and what part of their range am I trying to get to fold? I think you'll do well. And finally, in this bet sizing guide, test and review. Test and review. I cannot recommend too strongly to you to see bet sizing as a weapon in your no limit hold'em game and to test when you can make bigger bets, when you can make smaller bets, when you can get calls you didn't think you could get, when you can set up bets with smaller bets on the turn, then bigger bets on the river, where you can exploit different players and so on and so on. Test and then review what you did in the hand. And as part of your hand and session reviews, which I hope you do, even if it's just privately, but if it's with a coach, all the better, look at hands you've played and just ask a challenging question. When you win a hand, don't just be satisfied with the win, ask, could I have got paid more here? All right, I hope you enjoyed this guide to bet sizing. If you did, give the video a like, subscribe, turn on notifications so that when I make another one, you'll get told about it, and leave me a comment underneath the video. This video came from a suggestion from a viewer, so your video idea could be next. Leave them down below. And if you want to take your game to the next level, there's a link below this video where you can get some of our very best free training for free. Thank you for watching. Good luck experimenting with your bet sizing, and I'll talk to you again in another video very soon.